DeMaurice, it's great to see you.
It is great to see you again, my friend.
Executive Director of the NFLPA. Tell us what that title held.
Simply, you're the head of the union. You represent all 1,835 players. You go to war with 31 billionaires.
Very big picture question to you. Is the National Football League the most economically powerful quasi-religious institution in our country?
Unequivocally, yes. I'm rookies for 14 years. You are not in the family because you are not in the will. One is they want the players to give up their pensions. They want the players to give back 20% of their salaries, and they want the players to play 18 games for free. And that struck me as just a group of bullies just trying to dictate their way instead of sitting down with the men who actually do the work. But the reality is the only people who are on the field getting their fingers broken, their backs broken, and as we know from a couple weeks ago, putting themselves in harm's way, are the players. Everybody else is sitting up in the stand somewhere, chomping down on another shrimp cocktail. And I always felt that was an unfair thing. And I've always hated bullies. I decided that, sure, if the players are interested in coming up with a way to fight that, to kind of protect themselves, protect their families, to try to do what's right. I mean, it's a rare day that you get to be at a point in your life where you can lead a group of people into the right fight about the right things for all the right reasons.
Inextricably tied to how you see the people who play, how the people who play interact with each other, and the moral and ethical responsibilities that flow from that. And that is why I love the players of the National Football League. That's why I love the opportunity to be a coach myself. That's why I love the fans who love our game. But the beauty of this game and the beauty of sport will always be tied to one big idea, namely, how you see each and every one of the people who've chosen to be a part of a great game, chosen to be a part of sport.
All right, if you could welcome me and joining D. Smith to the stage. Yes, sir.
Wow, that was young D. Thank you, man. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for coming out tonight. Hopefully, to borrow a line from something we learned earlier, it's a great place to have, a safe place to have unsafe conversations.
That's right.
That's what I'm hoping we all have tonight.
That's right. So as you can see, D. Smith is prolific when it pertains to leadership. And as we get into a little bit more of the meat of what occurred during that 14 to 15 year experience running the NFLPA, I would love for us to get into really the life experience that created D. Smith. So if we could go all the way up to the edge of before we get to spring of 2009.
Sure.
Who is D. Smith? What were you doing? And just lead us into that.
There's no better frame to talk about 2009 to talk about 2008, because for me and hopefully everyone else here, a transformational event happens with the election of Barack Obama. I was on the justice transition team. And literally the only thing that I ever wanted to do after I left the U.S. Attorney's Office trying homicide cases was to go back to the U.S. Attorney's Office as the United States Attorney. And that was the path that I was going. I was working at the transition team, talking about all these new things and great things. Eric Holder was going to be the Attorney General, my boss for several years at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and tomorrow's award recipient. And I couldn't think of anything better than him as Attorney General, Barack Obama as the president, right, and D. Smith as the U.S. Attorney in D.C. And I got back to my office and there was a telephone call and the answering machine said, yeah, would you be willing to be a candidate for the executive director of the NFL Players Association? And I deleted the message. I did, and I thought it was the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Going backwards, I'd been a homicide prosecutor for years. I come from a family of Baptist preachers. Everyone, my father, my uncles, my grandfather, his father, everybody had been a Baptist preacher in Southern Virginia. I went to a pre-seminary school to study, and I knew within a year that I was not going to be a Baptist preacher. I knew I was going to be a trial lawyer. So that's really the genesis. I mean, I kept thinking about, okay, I'm going to finish college, went to the law school of University of Virginia, met my wife there, got married, and immediately went to the U.S. Attorney's Office, and I thought I would never leave. Right. Then when Eric became the Deputy Attorney General, I went as his chief counsel. I know he's not here tonight, we'll see him tomorrow, so nobody tell him the punchline. I've had a bunch of great jobs. The worst job in my life was being counsel to the Deputy Attorney General. I loved Eric to death. I hated that job. I mean, it was the worst. I thought it was the worst job I've ever had. And then, you know, I go into private practice and then on this transition team and then this call. And I deleted it. About 2 weeks later, a partner of mine from Latham called and said, hey, this person keeps calling me and they're trying to get in touch with you and you don't return the messages. And I was like, Tom, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. First of all, I'm going to be the U.S. attorney. I don't any this sports thing. And I finally called the search firm back and they said, well, will you at least just meet with the players? And I'll never forget it. I walked into the Fairmont Hotel one afternoon into this big, you know, ballroom, and you know, it's full of lawyers and full of other people, but in the room are Drew Brees, Mike Vrabel, Brian Dawkins, Dominique Foxworth, Jeff Saturday. And I sit down and Jeff, Kevin Mawai, who was the president at the time, said, so why don't you just start off telling us why you want the job? And I said, I don't want the job. And Brian Dawkins said, why do you think you're qualified for the job? And I said, I don't think I'm qualified for the job. And that's how it started.
Yeah. So one of I feel like a principle that I've seen about radical leadership, typically they don't want the job.
Yeah.
Right? There's a problem that they see and
a need. Yeah.
Yeah. And the potential of that need not being addressed really keeps you up.
Yeah.
So can you tell us more about that interview process as you're able to communicate with the athletes, because they're essentially interviewing you, but I think at the same time you're essentially interviewing them. So there is this dynamic about the NFL in regards of just how it's structured. So I think that education will be really good for our audience as well as you approach the opportunity.
Yeah, I will tell you, as you can imagine, from one person saying, do you want the job, me saying no, the second person saying, do you think you're qualified for the job, I said no. That meeting did not go well. And I thought I was done. I thought, whatever, we're through. The next day, the search firm person calls and she says, the executive committee really wants to meet with you again, and I don't know why. And I started studying because, and she said one thing that did capture my interest. She said, the players are going to be locked out. Gene Upshaw had run the union for longer than some of these people had been alive. He went into the hospital on a Wednesday, died on a Sunday. The league is going to take advantage of the fact that the leader who had been there for so long was gone. And like you heard in the clip, they wanted the players to give up their pensions, wanted their players to play 2 more games, 18 games for free. And that just struck me as just not a nice group of folks. And so the more I started studying the National Football League, the first thing you stumble on is they're not so much successful because these owners are brilliant or that they've created something interesting. The NFL is really successful only for one reason. They have an antitrust exemption that allows them to compete in a way that no other business in America conducts itself. So, the way that I teach my students is, imagine if Home Depot and Lowe's merged. The price of a hammer would be $500 because there's nobody else. The success of the National Football League is inextricably tied to the fact that they went to Congress, convinced Congress to give them the right to merge the AFL and the NFL together. And then they have the ability to negotiate singular television contracts and pool money. So, for some of the people out in the room, and there are some of you, I'm not going to name you, there's some people in the room who are older in the tooth like me. We remember the USFL went out of business, couldn't compete. We remember the World Football League went out of the business, couldn't compete. So you look at a group of 31 men who all look exactly the same way, who've conducted or constructed a business model that has no competition. There are no 10Ks, there's no 10Qs, there's no annual reports, there's no SEC jurisdiction, there's no Department of Justice jurisdiction. They do whatever they want. And that struck me as, well, these people are sort of ripe for somebody to declare a war on them if they're going to declare a war on the players.
Right.
And the next meeting with the players was that.
Yeah. So just even with, we'll just go through the athletic lens. I know we have a few current athletes here. We have some professional athletes here. We have some retired athletes. And regardless of the sport, we all know at the end of the day, if you have someone that you're about to go up against, you have the ability to watch film. You're able to study their techniques. You're able to study the timing, see just different tendencies. Then what were you able to study?
The great thing about the league is if you look in the right places, everything you need to know is in the public site. So, if you go back and understand the antitrust exemption, that tells you a story of just how much power a group of billionaires had, because the NCAA does not have an antitrust exemption. And one of the reasons why we have NIL now is only for the fact that the NIL didn't have literally the exemption that the league has. So, I started from a frame of the NFL is built on a crime. Antitrust violation is a crime. So the National Football League is built on a crime. When they convinced Congress to grant them 501c6 status, they're a nonprofit. So in 2009 up until 2013, 14, you're talking about an industry that was doing 10, 12, 14, $15 billion worth of revenue every year. The teams are made up of LLCs and LLPs. Right. So at the end of the day, I can tell you, you're looking at a multi-billion-dollar juggernaut where the tax liability for most teams is zero. And on the other side of the frame is a group of men, mostly under the age of 26, who play for 3.3 years and have a 100% injury rate. And then you have to walk into a room and you have to sit down with somebody like Clark Hunt or sit down with somebody like John Mara, and you have to listen to them explain to you about everything they've done to make this business so great. And my only takeaway is you act like you hit a triple, but you were born on third base. So why don't you two just pump the brakes, right? And so for me, you study where they're weak. The antitrust exemption was a weakness for them. I don't know if you remember a great senator who's no longer with us, but Senator Specter was senator from Pennsylvania who hated the league's antitrust exemption. Hated it. So where is the league weak on that? Where did we spend a lot of our lobbying dollars? That's where you go. So when it came time for us to have a hearing, for example, on concussions, who do you go to? Right. So, I love game strategy. And we talk a lot about Fred Shuttlesworth, and James Bevel and Diane Nash and all of the heroes who you see all throughout this wonderful museum. They were inspirational civil rights leaders, but my takeaway from them, that another level, incredible tacticians.
Yes.
I mean, just the brilliance of the strategy. And so we're here in Birmingham. It's the birth of, not only the civil rights movement, but the tactical decisions behind the Children's Crusade. The idea that, okay, they can arrest adults and keep them forever. They can't keep children forever. So we're actually going to devise a strategy where we're going to fill the jails with children as a way to break the back of the system. So I spend most of my time trying to engineer or re-engineer a strategy. Right. And at times it was enjoyable, and as you can see from my lack of hair, almost every other time it was maddening.
Yeah. So knowing that they have this range of flexibility, and unfortunately the lack of accountability when you think about the 31 owners, As you are approaching probably one of the most important times in NFL history, 2 years out, about to really negotiate this collective bargaining agreement, what type of strategy and opportunities did you see in representing the players that the owners may not have had on their radar?
You know, probably the most interesting is I was a partner at Latham & Watkins for a long time, and I was a trial lawyer. I got, again, all of the greatest opportunities, weirdly, that have always happened for me were things that I wasn't looking for, things I fell into. I fell into trying a really complicated insurance case for the Ford Motor Company, and I had to learn insurance law, which I can tell you is about as scintillating as eating dirt. And I'm just not an insurance lawyer. I'm just not that guy. But you learn it, you know, because you have to try the case. And, you know, we knew the owners were prepared for us to file our antitrust case. We understood that they were prepared for us to decertify as a union. And what worried me more than anything else is the bravado with which they were willing to go into this war, knowing that we were going to file those antitrust claims, which had always been the kind of the magic key, right? And, you know, if you're on the other side, I mean, and again, you study film, if the day that keeps you awake at night is when you study film and you realize the team you're about to play is well prepared for every play you've ever run. I mean, that keeps me awake at night.
Right.
And so this idea of, well, wait a minute, what if we trick them? You know, we make them believe we're going to play one play and it's basically an end around. And the end around was we bought a secret insurance policy that would have paid the players 6 figures if we ever make it to the lockout. And so the game strategy, you know, that I understood from the owners was that, look, just being honest, the NFL players had a history of failed strikes. They had a failed strike in '83, they had a failed strike in '86, '87, they had a failed strike in '91. So the owners knew that there was always a matter of time. Yep. That if the players went out, there's just a matter of time before the players are going to break and they're going to beg to come back to work. And I was positive that the owners had over-undered that to somewhere around 7 games, 6 games. What the secret insurance policy did was I now know that I can pay every player 6 figures if we go the whole season. Nobody's going to break. So, you know, when you start doing the reverse engineering of how the league is structured, remember, we're coming out of the 2008 Great Recession. You couldn't get a loan for $4 million. The owners were crowing about having a $4 billion war chest. So in addition to doing the secret insurance policy, we had a crazy theory. You know, what if the TV networks gave the owners $4 billion? And I remember having that conversation with our lawyers in the office, and they thought that that was the dumbest thing that they had ever heard. And we actually found one owner who had said something about the new TV contracts, so we sued him. And you know what we found? We found out that the TV networks had given the league $4 billion. But because the players get half of that money, we also came up with a theory, and for the lawyers in the room, it's called, we're third-party beneficiaries. Well, if they got $4 billion from the networks, that costs something. And the players are paying that cost. So we sued them under breach. A judge ruled for the players, froze their $4 billion. You know, now we're talking. So now they don't have a war chest. But who does? We do. We've got the secret insurance policy. Right. So that day where I get to walk into an office at Cravath in New York. We're walking down the hall. The only people who knew about the secret insurance policy were the executive committee. It was, you know, Drew Brees and Dawkins and Saturday and Mawai and Mike Vrabel, who's now a coach. You know, watching all these dudes do what they do now, you know, sometimes I forget that they were 24 years old back then, right? And so we finally decide this is the day we're going to spring it on the owners that we have this secret insurance policy. And so I get ready to walk out. Jeff Saturday comes with me, Foxworth comes with me, and Mawai comes with me. And as we're walking out, I won't use his name. I think I used it in the book, but I won't use his name. There was another player who just, let's just charitably say that he wasn't a D. Smith fan. at all. And as we're walking out the door, he throws a fit. He's an offensive left tackle, ginormous. You know, he's a biscuit away from like 360 pounds. And he says, I don't know where you guys are going, but wherever you guys are going, I'm going with you. And I'm like, well, first of all, you're not on the executive committee. And second, you know, I don't like you. You know, I mean, just to put like the dot on the I is that I don't like you. And he said, you know, then it's the whole thing. You know, why does it have to be secret? Why does this? And finally, I was just like, look, okay, you know what? Fine, let's go. So we're walking down the hall. I know we're about to drop this bomb on the owners. And we get to the door, and I put my hand on the doorknob. And I go to turn the doorknob to go inside. And I know inside the room is Kraft, Jones, Mara, and my BFF, Roger Goodell. That's a joke. And I realized that the player, Tyson Clabo, there it is, I named him, didn't know about the deal. So I step away from the door and I'm like, hey, Tyson, before we go in the room, you have to understand, your executive committee came up with a way to protect the men. And we're going to protect the men by buying a secret insurance policy. The owners think we're going to capitulate at week 7. They've told their bankers that we're going to capitulate at week 7 because they've got to service the debt on their stadiums. Again, it's the Great Recession, right? They've personally guaranteed all these loans on their stadiums. So they've told all their bankers, this thing will be over by week 3, week 4, no later than week 7. Once I throw that thing on the owner is going to have to go back to the bankers and say this thing might last for 17 weeks, in which case the bankers become what? My friend. So I pull on the door, go back, I tell Tyson that we've done this, we've bought this secret insurance policy, and this ginormous dude who hated D turns to me and he goes, are you for real? And I said, Tyson, I would lie about a lot. And I would bluff a lot, but I couldn't bluff about this. And he goes, bro, that's awesome. And we went in and dropped it on the table, and Jerry Jones lost his mind. D, I don't know what you're doing. I just don't understand it. My terrible Jerry Jones imitation. And Robert Kraft said, I think we have an issue. And then Jerry Jones said, why don't we put all our guns in our holsters? And that's how we got the deal done.
I think that deserves a round of applause, absolutely. One of the things that I'm very interested in, as we all know, the unfortunate truth of the 78 to 80% of NFL, NBA players that go bankrupt 3 to 5 years after their last game. There is this lack of exposure into not only the financial world, but also some of the acumen that is necessary to be able to manage the resources that they have. And then the exposure into some of the business world. So that's why there's so much uncertainty, but also issues when it pertains to them being able to identify an agent.
And a lot of victimization.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm curious, when you're having these conversations with the athletes about a pretty complicated strategy, alongside saying, hey, I think y'all need to start saving your money, because this may go, how did they receive that information, and how are you able to navigate their uncertainty and educate them in that moment?
Know, in no small way, I would never want to live between 2009 and 2011 again. It was just too much pressure, too much stress. Too much Pepto-Bismol and too much Johnny Walker Blue. And so I never want to do that again. But I will say this, nothing acted to focus the players more on saving their money and being financially solvent than then, right? Because you could give a guy a day, and we did. On March 12th of 2011, we are going to be locked out. It's not an if, not an and or a but. It's going to happen on this day. And what that means is you're going to lose any salary that's coming to you. And honestly, the best and worst message, the league is going to cut off your benefits. So we had 33 women who were due to give birth between March and August. And the league cut off their health insurance. We had 10 to 15 players who either had kids with special needs or cancer treatments
or at-home care for elderly parents or kids, and the league cuts off the health insurance. So, as horrible as that was, it's not hard to stand up in front of a group of men who sometimes, as you know, have an inability to focus. Mm-hmm. Everybody becomes focused the day that you have to go home and tell mama that we don't have any health insurance. Yeah. And then two things happen. She says, "What are you talking about?" And then he picks up the phone and he calls me. And so, that ability to kind of talk to players over a 2-year period, right, that this was going to happen. And for the ones who didn't believe it, when it did happen, it turned everybody's head right. And so, to a certain extent, it's easier to lead people when you're in a war. It becomes harder, as I found out, to lead people when you're not in one.
Mm. Can you zoom out and just speak about what is the overall role of the NFLPA?
Yeah. We represent, they, royal we. I am not there anymore. The National Football League is a union. It represents every player, every active player in the National Football League, much like, Cecil Roberts ran the miners union, or Rich Trumka ran the miners union. And the idea is that as a collective, you could accomplish more as a collective than you can individually. So, when you think about the unique structure of the National Football League, the only way that they're able to keep their antitrust exemption is if there's a union. So weirdly, the owners want the union to exist. Now, they don't want Nat Turner running the union. They would much rather have somebody a little more kinder, gentler. But, sorry. But they want a union because they want all of the benefits of the antitrust exemption. Right. And my job, looking at it the other way, was if you have to eat the union, right, in order to continue with your business model, man, you're going to eat the whole thing. Right. So everybody pack a lunch. This is not going to be easy. I looked at the job as not that it's important for me to not have a good relationship with the league, right? Because they're there to perpetuate football, and I was there to perpetuate the benefit of the players. Yeah. So, in a weird way, I have to think, at least existentially, that one day I might have to stand up and say we shouldn't play football anymore. Right.
So how was your engagement with the owners? When did that start? So I know on the front end, of course, the first agreement you need to make is with the athletes. Yeah. And then, of course, as you study film, you know that at some point we're going to need to put a face to a name. Yep. So when did that introduction start sitting down, meeting with the owners, and stating the case?
The first, I was elected in March 13th of 2009. I had a famous lunch with Roger that next week. 22nd, 23rd, we had lunch at the Caucus Room in in DC. And I picked the Caucus Room because it was owned by the boss that I had used to work with, a guy named Tom Boggs, who's just one of the biggest Democratic lobbyists of all time. And I picked the Caucus Room because I figured that was probably the one restaurant that I could pretty much assume where my table wasn't bugged. I'm being dead serious.
Yeah.
Because look, I had represented the biggest companies in the world. Once you get your head around that these are 31 billionaires and it's an unregulated industry, I would always ask the players, if you knew you were going to make $25 billion this year, what would you do? Right? So we met at the Caucus Room. Lunch was terrible, as usual. Roger is just so wooden and so hard and such a we grew to like each other a little bit more near the end, but God, he can just be a real asshole. He's just hard, and everything is hard. And so we get done with the lunch, and I'll never forget, he reaches up to his lapel, and there's a NFL pen. And he pulls off the NFL pen, puts the back on it, slides it across the table, and he says, welcome to the NFL family. And I took my fingers on the pen and I pushed it back across the table and I said, I'll never be a part of the NFL family. And that's how we met. So the owners really didn't want to meet. Right. And so I started this public campaign about how the owners were disrespecting the players by not meeting them face to face. And look, I needed to get them into the room. Right.
So, I think when we were on the tour, there was a point where we get in the tour and he shows us a picture of Bull Connor, and I guess it was Fred Shuttlesworth who said that Bull Connor made him the person that he was. Roger Goodell and the owners made me the person that I needed to be.
Right.
And that person isn't going to be a friend. It's not going to be somebody who's trying to find common ground. It's going to be an adversary.
Right.
And so within 2 weeks, we meet with the owners for the first time. And that first meeting was important because it was the only meeting where Mike Brown, the owner of the Bengals, that was the first meeting that Mike Brown was allowed to say something. And he said things that were so offensive that the owners didn't let him back in the other meetings.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And that includes, when I say more offensive, Jerry Richardson called me uppity at a meeting. So, Mike Brown managed to see and raise Jerry Richardson. But, he was just offensive.
Yeah.
And, the owners just, he's offensive and crazy. But, again, my biggest takeaway from the first meeting all the way through until we came close to figuring out who has the power, because you have to figure that out in the room. Who has the power? Not all of them have the power.
Right.
My biggest takeaway from meeting with the owners at the beginning was, and I think this is true for the billionaire class, their utter indifference to our existence. I would respect them more if they hated working people. They're just indifferent. Like where you go to shop, they don't know. How you make ends meet, they have never thought about it. How you manage health care and your rent and your salary, I can just tell you that they never have a conscious thought about those things. And so, so much so that when an owner, we were talking about it earlier, an owner walks into the room, we have a mandatory negotiating session by the judge. We all introduce ourselves. And one owner, when it gets to him to introduce himself, he says, "Why am I here?" And I thought, it's funny now, but, I'm sitting there listening to this owner show up, and he says in front of other owners, "Why am I here?" And I was like, okay, that's kind of disrespectful to me and the players, but it's far more disrespectful to your other owners. He's literally looking at those dudes going, I know why y'all are here. I just don't know why I'm here. That was one of that moment where it was just, then the light bulb comes on and you realize that it's a group of people who, half of them have inherited their wealth. The other half likes to tell a story, like Dan Snyder tells a story that he's a self-made man, but he just omits the fact that his father bought him the first 30 radio stations that he ever owned. And I'm like, except for that small fact, you're a self-made man, right? And so you have to hear that and endure that, and then you sort of realize that this is a class of people that are intentionally out of touch with reality because they want to create a new reality where they don't feel guilty taking advantage of everybody else around them.
Right.
That's who they are.
Yeah. While you had the position, one of the comments you made is that you never want to be satisfied when it pertains to health. And if we fast forward right past 2011, things have been negotiated. One of the, I would say, examples we were all able to see was the unfortunate just silence when Damar Hamlin was essentially horizontal for longer than what we would like to see. There were some interventions that occurred that, depending upon who you speak to, based off of the leadership and your ability to make sure that the players' rights were represented, that it could have went a different way if that wasn't the case. Can you speak to how you were able to ensure that, again, the health is prioritized, but again, we got the real life example of Damar Hamlin on, I want to say he was dead for a certain amount of time on that field, and there were certain things that were done due to what you...
Look, that was one of the most horrible days that I can remember. And you know, the weird thing is I almost never watched NFL football. You know, when I had the job, my wife and I were watching that game for some reason. But I knew one thing, you know, for the, whatever it was, 35, you know, 40, almost 40 minutes, right? The only saving grace is I knew that Damar Hamlin was in the safest place he could possibly be. And I know that sounds crazy, but in 2009, when I took the job, there was no credentialing of doctors. Team doctors could have financial incentives or affiliations with the league. Nobody checked their qualifications for being a team doctor. None. There were no standards for the health and safety equipment that was at the stadiums. Some people had ambulances and defibrillators, some people didn't. It was just left up to what the owner thought was okay. Wow. So one of the things we changed in 11 was standardizing everything that needed to be on a sideline, and for the first time credentialing doctors. And when we went back and looked at some of the team doctors, we realized they should never be team doctors. I mean, terrifying fact, the head of the league's concussion committee, when I took the job in 2009, was a rheumatologist.
Now, what's a rheumatologist going to help me? I don't know.
You know, aches and pains, you know, sort of joint injuries. He was the league's chief concussion expert.
Wow.
He was the one, if you watch the movie Concussion with Will Smith, he was the one that worked to ban Dr. Amalu's studies on CTE.
Wow.
A rheumatologist. So you fast forward, you know, to that unfortunate event in you know, later on, and we can, if you want to, we can talk about my conversations with Roger that night, and they were not nice. But the only saving grace is I knew that that Damar was literally in the safest place. And so, you know, fast forward, once we realized that he had suffered the commotio cordis, which, you know, digging through had killed a lacrosse player a year earlier. Yeah. You know, for the people in the room, you know, your heart runs on a number of electrical signals. If you take the right hit at the right spot at the right time during the right moment of that electrical movement, it just short circuits the circuit, and that's what happened.
Yeah.
The lacrosse player did not have a defibrillator. He died. And the thing that saved Damar was two things. We require not only 2 defibrillators, but we require several people who know how to do CPR. So one of the untold stories there is when Damar is on that field, the defibrillator didn't work. And again, we don't really know, but at some point we heard that he kept switching the thing to charge, which means that it's off. Charge is, it's already charged and you're ready to go. He thought that charge was already go, then he turns it this way and then he uses it and he kept turning it off. But the good news, there were so many people who knew CPR, they never stopped giving him CPR. So the fact that there was this continuous non-breaking moment of oxygen going both from his heart to his brain saved his life. And that was because, you know, a union was never satisfied with the level of health and safety, and I'm still not.
Right. So who makes that phone call? Damar's on the field, you see what's going on, you are now watching the game. Is Roger calling you or are you calling him?
First call I got was from our medical director, and that's the way we usually go. He wasn't there, but we always have somebody from the union that's a designee. So he had talked to her, she called him back. We got sketchy information that the first thing I heard was that they might be trying to intubate him. And, but if you remember watching that game, the thing that was horrifying for me was, having spent so many years around players, the looks on their faces, they've seen everything.
That's right.
Twice.
Yep.
That look was something they've never seen. And even though I couldn't see Damar, I could see them.
Yeah.
And then if you remember, just the amount of time.
Yeah.
So, you know, after a period of time, I picked up the phone and called Roger and said, this game, just end the game. I mean, I don't know what's going on the field, but this has gone on way too long. You know, if everything goes horribly wrong, they just bring the ambulance and they take you away. You know, they hadn't even done that. I mean, they're working, so I know then that they're working on the field to keep him alive on the field.
Right.
And that it's too dangerous to transport him from the field. So after the 15th, 20th, 30th minute, I called Roger and said that, look, just call the game. I mean, having the guys stand out there watching a traumatic event, having this play out live on television, that's just a lack of humanity.
Right.
Let's just say he didn't see it that way. And then, if you remember, all the players then went to their respective locker rooms. And I got a call from a player from the Bengals locker room. And he told me what he saw. And then he said, D, I'm telling you right now, the quarterbacks are warming up. Because it's football.
Yep.
Everybody's just conditioned to what? Play the game.
Keep going. Yep.
I mean, unless lava is flowing down the side of the stadium.
That's right.
You play the game.
That's right.
He said the quarterbacks are warming up. He was a special teams player. He said the offensive defense is already broken up into separate rooms, so they're going over gameplay and they're watching film from the first half, right? And so I called Roger back and I said, this can't go. And if you want to blame it on D. Smith, blame it on D. Smith. I mean, I don't really care. I would also say that I probably laced a few more expletives than I will share with you tonight, because my mother might see this. And I was just struck by Roger's indecision. And finally, we had one more phone call, hung up with no decision, and then he called me maybe about 30 minutes later and said, "Okay, I've decided to call the game." Yeah.
So I can only imagine, being the executive director of the NFLPA, and you're representing ultimately players.
Yeah.
The unfortunate truth is that not everyone makes the greatest decisions.
Sometimes not. Sometimes not.
And 9 times out of 10, they're coming to D. Smith and saying, "Hey, what do we need to do?" And so one of those examples that we all saw was, unfortunately, with Ray Rice.
Yeah.
There was the truth of the domestic violence that we all were able to witness.
Yeah, horrible.
But there also came a responsibility that was brought on your shoulders. So can you speak about that situation and then the ways in which you were able to remedy it while respecting just the due process component of it?
Look, there were 2 Ray Rice stories, right? There was the one that, the story about what happens at the Revel Casino comes out, he gets suspended for 2 games, 3 games, whatever it was. And then there was a second story when the video came out. And when the video came out,
That's right.
I can say that was a horrible day. I was on a plane flying to DC. And I'm sorry, flying to California, and I'm one of those guys on the plane that I don't do the Wi-Fi. Like, why? It's like one of the few moments in life where you're just sealed off from the world. Read a book, So I didn't do the Wi-Fi. I land, of course, my phone's on fire. Watching the second video, I flipped back to my homicide prosecutor days. And that's just a brain shift that happens,
Right.
And especially if you're a father and's got a daughter, I mean, you're ready to go. But my job is to represent Ray Rice.
Yeah.
And I don't shirk away from that. I didn't poo-poo it. We felt that he was punished the first time. And when the video came out, you changed the punishment, even though he had said exactly the same thing. And like we did in Deflategate and Bountygate and all those things, we went to war with the league. Yeah. And of course, I know the league is going to play this that D. Smith is soft on domestic violence because that's the narrative that is best for the league. And that's look, that's the way hardball is played. Mm-hmm. What I was most concerned about was making sure that our players understood that we were defending his rights as an NFL player under the collective bargaining agreement. And I didn't want any player coming out saying anything against Ray Rice, because if you're trying to undercut or to justify a process that wasn't fair, that's a process. That's the same unfair process that's going to hurt us down the road. Right. So I'm not asking you to be his best friend. I'm not asking you to give him absolution. But I do need all of you to wrap your heads around. We're just protecting him within the process. But it was hard. It wasn't pleasant. Ray I had known him really, really well. And so, I got sort of caught up with just the whole humanity of it. And it was one of the rougher times for the union. But I'm proud of the job that we did. I really am.
Speaking to Deflategate, and then even I would say over the last 5 years or so, we've seen, I would say over the last decade, we've seen the value of storytelling. And so knowing the role that storytelling played, especially from the perspective of the NFL, was that your first lens of how they would construct a story?
A narrative.
Yes.
Yeah, that was the first time that I was concerned or aware of how far they would go. Remember, but by the time we got to Deflategate, I'd already done Bountygate, with the Saints. I had done a case called Star Caps with Kevin and Pat Williams and, a drug that they claimed that they called the league. Well, they didn't. They called the league and said that they could use it, and then the league punished them for it. So I'd had a few of those where, the league just makes up stuff. Deflategate was one where that was the first time that I was just struck with, okay, if there's anybody who's not Patriots fans, we can deal with it like reasonable people. But Deflategate was the first time that I was struck with how far they would go with something I thought that was absolutely stupid. I mean, because you remember, the Patriots beat the brakes off of them in the second half with overly inflated footballs. So I'm like, it's kind of tough, what are we doing? I mean, look, you take the footballs away and then they score 40 points. I just couldn't believe that this thing kept going. And if you remember, this is the AFC Championship game, right? I mean, the NFL's prom is the Super Bowl. Nothing gets in the way of the Super Bowl. Nothing. So I'm like, why are they making such a big deal of this heading into their prom? And then, of course, you get into their prom and the Patriots beat the brakes off of somebody else in the thing. And then the thing goes into next year. And then it struck me that, well, wait a minute. Maybe this is not so much an NFL versus Tom. This might be NFL owners versus Robert Kraft. And then I realized that sometimes we might just be the pawn in a much ladder. I mean, he's ginormous. And he goes, you're our new leader, and I thought it was important to walk you into the team room.
Wow.
Tom Brady. I know. Everybody wants to hate him. But he's that guy. So watching him go through Deflategate was hard. Because I think up until that point, for a player, especially a player of that status, you're living in a dream world that's even different than every other NFL player. And then the whole thing turns on you. And he realized, when we talk about it in the family, you're not in the family. That was when Tom Brady realized he wasn't in that family.
Speaking of quarterbacks, crazy enough, next year will be 10 years since Colin Kaepernick took a knee.
Man, you say things that make me feel older than
10 years. And as we all know, that got the whole world's attention. And alongside that, you still have the role as the executive director of the NFLPA. Colin takes a knee. When do you get a call?
That night. He sat on the bench in the first preseason game. He took a knee in the second preseason game. I'm not watching preseason games. And I get a call from my communications director, George Atala, great guy. And he says, hey, Colin Kaepernick took a knee during the anthem of the preseason game. And I said, okay, when do I give a statement? Because for me, he may not have understood how this was going to play out.
Yeah.
And I think, frankly, and I'm not castigating him in any way. It'd be impossible for somebody in that position to know how it's going to play out. I'd been through, Spygate. I'd been through Deflategate. I'd been through Ray Rice. So I know what league apparatus is on its way to demonize him. So I felt it was important. It was a Saturday. I felt it was important on that Saturday night to give a statement to the nation. And I'd read a couple of his postings, and I, again, it's the messaging, right? This is not about the police. This is not about the flag. This is not about the military. He is protesting what he sees as gross injustice connected to police brutality. And that's his message. And you want that for two reasons. One, I'm leading a group of young men, and I love the idea of them sometimes more than I love them individually. Once again, I have a son. But I want them to read from me what the message is. Right. So that hopefully when they get hit by the question in a locker room, they don't say anything that is not completely thought through. Right. And look, the reality is, and it might come as a surprise, it might come as a surprise for people who haven't been in locker rooms. It probably won't come as a surprise to people who have spent a long time in the locker rooms. Locker rooms are far more conservative than you think. They just are. Yep. And it doesn't really break down on race. It might break down a little bit on class, but it's not binary as outside of the locker room. So I know I'm dealing with a rather conservative group that is going to skew more pro-military, more police, more Republican. And I want that message to be the right message. Right. So that's what we did. And I knew that it was going to play out the way that it would play out. But I will say, for the 3 years that we represented Colin, he obviously had his own personal lawyers, and it was his own personal lawyers that made the decision to settle the case. That's a whole different thing, as we would say. But I would say this, for the 3 years that we were in that, and also representing the players who chose to kneel and protecting their right for free speech, those are the best 3 years I had in the office.
Wow.
Why? If you remember that time, for a union leader, you're consumed with players being on the same page. I don't need them to all agree on everything, but I need them to agree that they are all one collective unit. Right. And so at a time when it was the president's first term, and what really triggered the mass movement from the players was a speech in Huntsville. Yep. And I will never forget that as long as I live. I wasn't watching him. I know that might come as a surprise. But again, George, I now realize that George Atala gives me all but bad calls. He called me up and he said, hey, everything's about to break loose. The president's given a speech in Huntsville, Alabama, where he has said, wouldn't it be great if every owner fired every son of a bitch who yelled? And I'm positive, and again, I'm not defending the president, I'm positive he didn't appreciate the fact that he had just called every NFL player's mothers. Yeah. Where we come from, man, everybody is about to get laid hands on.
Come on now.
Right? I mean, that is just the one, that is the line, that is the Gaddafi line of death, as we would say when we were kids, right? You might lose the fight.
Come on.
But you're in the fight. You're in it.
That's right.
And so, literally within an hour of that speech happening, I had 5 teams that didn't want to play that Sunday. That was a Wednesday night when that speech happens. I've got teams losing their minds. And so, on one hand, you're happy about that because guys are unified around one common fight. The lawyer part of you, however, is saying, okay, well, wait a minute, we have a no strike clause in our collective bargaining agreement, just like the owners have a no lockout clause. So if those players decide not to play, I'm going to defend them and we'll go. But just know that if the teams decide not to play, the owners are going to sue us for breach. And that breach is going to be in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And we'll lose. And then they can take the next step of, because it's a strike, they could declare the CBA as now null and void, which means nobody gets paid the next week, which means nobody gets their benefits, which nobody gets their health care. That's a tough one. Right. So again, whatever you guys choose to do, I will be with you, but my job is to explain the ramifications. So, I'm on a plane that morning flying around to the teams that have said that they don't want to play. They've all made the decision except for one team, and it was the Houston Texans. Because by the time I got to Houston, the owner of that team, McNair, had now famously said to the players that we can't have a situation where the inmates are running the asylum. That's right. I'm like, come on, bro. Right? I mean, it's just like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
And those players were playing the Raiders in Oakland that Sunday, and they had said they're not getting on the plane. Yeah. And I met with them and said, okay. Yeah. We'll see what happens. So why did I love it? Because that weekend, if you remember, every team knelt.
Yeah.
Everyone. And I love our guys, and I know there's some of them in the room. Y'all can also drive me absolutely crazy. Like absolutely crazy, because players are just hard to deal with. And people just have this idea about what a locker room is. It is nothing like you think it is. I mean, it just isn't. But that ability for 60 dudes in a locker room, regardless of what they felt about X, Y, and Z, many of them didn't like Colin. Some of them did. Right. Some people had, players had family members in the military. We have players in the league who were from the military. But all of those guys decided that weekend that collectively, this is what they were going to do. And that's a powerful thing. Right. Especially we're sitting in a museum that talks about collective action. Right. So I flew to Phoenix, not because I had anything to do in Phoenix. I flew to Phoenix on Monday night for only one reason, because Jerry Jones had said that he was going to cut any player who knelt. And I had made a stop in Dallas, and I was going to talk to the team. First two people I met Dak and met Zeke in the hallway, and they were like, oh no, we're kneeling. It's like, okay, then I can go to the plane and fly away. Which I did, only to be stopped by Jerry Jones. D, this is just too much problem, too much politics, just too much politics. We got to keep politics out of this. And I was like, well, okay. But you're either going to be on the train or in front of the train. And I flew to Phoenix for only one reason, to see what Jerry would do. And I walked out of the tunnel, saw the players line up, saw the Cowboys players line up, saw Jerry at the far right end. And if you remember, what does Jerry do? Walks his 168-year-old body to the middle of the field, joined arms, and knelt. Yeah. And then, so for me, those 3 years of players having a sense of solidarity, when, if you remember the rest of the country, all you had to do was open up your laptop and look at a town meeting. People were throwing chairs, people were throwing punches. Yeah. And who would have thought that a group of people primarily under the age of 26 would figure out a way to talk to each other man to man in a reasonable way better than the adults. Right. That was cool.
Yeah. How did you carry all of this? 7 years in, the real question I'm actually asking, how does your wife carry all of this? Because
she's a saint.
Okay.
33 years of wedded bliss, primarily based on I'm terrified of my wife. I know it sounds like a joke. No, I do. I just go, and she does everything else. Raise the kids, does everything else. In the book, and I talk about it a lot in the book because I always believed that if I was going to go hard on people in the book, I had to be equally hard on myself. There were moments in the job that I did not handle it particularly well, stress-wise. There's probably a 1.5, 2-year period where, for me to go to sleep, it was, either hit, 3 old fashions or 5 martinis and drink a half a bottle of wine.
Yeah.
And that caught up to me at a certain point because you do think you're indestructible.
Yeah.
And I got away from the sort of the ways that I used to deal with it before. And look, being an athlete in college, really gives you, I think any athlete who plays for that long, to get through college, the beauty of playing in college is it's hard. If you want to treat your college experience as an authentic college experience and you want to be as good of an athlete as you can possibly be, it is very, very hard to do those two things. You have to be really regimented. You have to figure out how to deal with the things that you don't deal with well. And for a long time I was good with that. And then I just think I fell apart because the stress to me was at times existential because, when you realize the power on the other side, and if they ever get their heads around destroying the players, they can do that.
Yep.
And so you spend a lot of time trying to play, 3-dimensional chess.
Right.
And sometimes the players just don't understand what's at stake.
Right.
And trying to drag them along about what's at stake is just sometimes pushing a rock up a hill.
Right. Can you explain, so let's fast forward into 2020.
Yep.
And so another agreement is on the table.
Yep.
There was a lot of conversation about the 17th game.
Yeah.
What was the key difference between the 2011 collective bargaining agreement and the 2020 collective bargaining agreement?
Yeah, 2 big differences. The 2011 deal was existential.
Yeah.
Right? Because if, and God bless him. I mean, Gene Upshaw's gone. There's some short kid from DC who's now taken over. He doesn't know anything about sports. They're going to run over him and have a union that's weak. There was a person that played a pivotal role in that who's now the vice president of the league. We are probably not going to be exchanging any Christmas gifts with each other anytime soon. But the 2011 deal was existential. Because I saw it as their attempt to crush the union from now forever, much like they crushed the hockey union 2 years before. Remember, there was a lockout in hockey in 2007 that lasted half their season. They broke the hockey union. I mean, those players came back to work taking 20%, 30% pay cuts. They lost most of their benefits, and to a certain extent, they've never recovered.
Wow.
The lawyer that represented the NHL was the same lawyer that was representing the NFL. So you talk about how do you learn,
right?
It's public.
Right.
So once I realized that it's the same lawyer, we know it's going to be the same tactic.
Right.
So 2011 was existential, but there was a flip side of 2011 where we needed to be locked out. Because the one thing that I hated about the 2006 deal is that the players couldn't control their work. So, again, there's some long-toothed folks here. There was a time when there was a 12-game NFL season. It went from 12 to 14 to 16. That was just the owners saying we want more games. The players couldn't stop it. So when it went from 12 games to 16 games, the players never got paid any more money. So the way that I looked at 2011 was, if we don't fix that, by 2018, we're going to have a 25-game season. Why not?
Right.
So, and that was a thing that I think it was easy to explain to the players in 2011.
Yeah.
That if we don't go to war over this, if they can add games, more and more games, we just can't win. So you fast forward to 2020, once we got the ability to control our work, the idea was we're going to use 2011 to set up the 2020 deal. We know that, by the time we get to 2020, they're going to want at least 2 more games.
Right.
But now you have to pay for them.
right? In the old deal, you didn't have to pay for them. In this deal, you have to pay for them. And there's all sorts of things that we want. So it was a straight economic deal, at least that's the way it started, because we valued the 17th game at about $1.5 billion for that one game, extra money, and the league ended up paying us $1.75 billion for that one game. That's the deal.
That's a win. I think that's
a win.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, the terrifying thing was while the players were voting, this little thing called COVID happened. And I flew to, our meetings were in Florida, and to your point, man, look, the 17th game was highly controversial. And my thing was, again, going back to a group of young men, I'm very linear in the way that I think. Right. It's like, okay, we want massive raises, we want more money, we want all of these things. The league is tied, the way they want to buy it for a 17th game. I'm not playing.
Yeah.
So we either get the stuff that we want, and that comes with the 17th game, or just say no. And you don't, I don't care.
Yeah.
The fight between the two, however, became the first deal that we had ever done with social media. And that changed the context of everything. Because for the first time, I had some player leaders who, because of social media and how they thought they were going to be judged, made a decision that they didn't want to lead. And that's hard.
Yeah.
Because you either pick door A or door B.
Yeah.
Well, D, there's a door C. No, there's not.
Yeah.
Choose. And having a group of people, or some of those people who are unwilling to make the choice and unwilling to lead, made it a very, very sort of awkward process. Amplified by the fact that I knew that the world was going to shut down.
Yeah.
So, you have two choices in that moment. You can stand up in front of the players and say, look, if we don't vote for this deal, this is what's going to happen. The league, once COVID hits, the league is going to cancel the season. That's the last season before our deal expires. That means players will be out of work for an entire year. Then the league year will end and the CBA will end, and we would have been out of work for a whole year. Where does that leverage shift? That leverage shifts to them in a monumental way, because now they can say to us, we're going to be out of work for another year, and players are never going to accept being out of work for 2 years.
Yeah.
It's just a game strategy.
Yeah.
So, with that part in the back of your head, you are sort of forced to deal with a parade of horribles down the road, but trying to figure out how to deal with it without tipping your hand to the league, right? Because, and again, whether the players knew it or not, I think I told them when we were in Florida, the Major League Soccer players were going through a CBA process at exactly the same time we did.
Really?
The owners in the Major League Soccer pulled the deal off the table because they saw COVID coming. Roger didn't believe that COVID was a big deal. He didn't. And because I kept waiting for them to pull the deal off the table, because that deal is predicated on pre-COVID economics, which is from the marker, from the basis points, that's a $2 billion swing.
Yeah.
Right? The league simply didn't believe in COVID. And it was my job not to tell them. Right? So that's literally how that deal happened. I'm sitting there trying to push the players to approve the deal, and that deal was approved by 67 votes. That's literally the margin.
Yeah.
And people like to say, that's a little crazy, but I also look at it like this. We have 2,500 players, 1,900 of them voted. If 85% of Americans voted, we would have a different democracy.
Yeah.
The fact is less than 25% of Americans vote.
Right.
So that deal was approved on a Sunday. Basketball shut down that Monday. Baseball shut down that Tuesday, which I didn't really care. But March Madness shut down on Wednesday.
and then I cared.
Yeah.
So literally, we got a deal done 3 days before the entire world shut down. And then we had to figure out a way to play in COVID,
Right.
which required another collective bargaining agreement 3 months later. And again, that was the hardest deal that I've done in 3 years. And of all the three, the third COVID deal was the worst. Because to me, I had to ask myself this existential question again of, man, should we be even playing? Now that's the thought of the D. Smith sitting in his office. I can tell you, every football player wanted to play in COVID. We had a handful of players that didn't, so we had to, we came up with a way of paying those guys a certain amount of money even if they didn't play, which, as you can imagine, didn't make the owners happy. But more important for me, basketball and baseball were required to put 30% of their salaries into escrow. And my experience in big business was once you put money in escrow, you never see it again. And so the league wanted the football players to put their money in escrow, and I said no. And we fought and played chicken up until, 2 weeks before the season started, and they blinked and we didn't, and every player got their full salary, even though the NFL was $4 billion off that year.
Wow. If I remember correctly, there was a structuring of the revenue share that was a little different in the 2020 CBA. Can you speak to just the serial killer approach that you needed to take to ensure that the proper percentage was reflected for the athletes?
Yeah, and those things, you hate to be, you like to tell these stories, and the reality is, 95% of the job is you're a dork looking at regression analysis and spreadsheets, right? It sounds great, but everybody was like, "Oh, D, it must be a great job being the head of the NFL, Players Association." And I was like, "It's not like me and Tom Brady are out back pitching the ball back and forth." Hey, Tom, that play you ran, what were you thinking? No, it's just not. It's not the job, So I always looked at the NFL as this forced, binary system where we take all the revenue that's generated and the players get close to 50%. And getting as close to that 50% was important, philosophically, right? That deal became very complicated because the owners were adamant that they didn't want to go over 48% or 47.5%, whatever it was, which again, you watch ESPN and some nitwit like Pat McAfee or some nitwit like Stephen A. Smith, as you can imagine, I'm not fans. There's plenty of money to go around. I don't know why people are fighting over the money. Well, in our world, every percentage point in 2020 was about $160 million. Every point. If you do a 10-year deal, that's times 10.
Yeah.
So when you say, I don't know, D, why you're spending so much time fighting over a point, I'm saying I'm fighting over $1.6 billion.
Right.
And as my father would say, I would bend down and pick that up if it was on the street. Right? And so, so the way that we structured that deal, which I'm sure the owners hate now, we did two things that were sort of interesting. One, we increased the amount of money that teams had to spend. Because again, for fans, I came into the league in 2009 thinking, well, everybody spent the salary cap because everybody wants to spend the most amount of money, right, so that your team can win. Until I ran a regression analysis in 2011 and found out that there were more than 10 teams spending less than 80% of the cap. Just didn't spend it. And why didn't they spend it? It's because the owner could stuff it in his greedy little pocket with his greedy little fat fingers, right? And so by the time we get to 2020, I want 100% of that money spent, right? And then we figured out a way of projecting the media revenue over the next several years. And if we hit certain gates, we would get increased shares of that share. So
That's gone wildly well, as we would say. I think last year in free agency was the first time that owners spent more than $4.5 billion in free agency in less than 25 days.
Wow. We're going to have about 2 or 3 more questions, and then we're going to pass the mic around for the audience to be able to ask questions as well. Definitely want to flag, again, there is food out there and some cold snacks for you to be able to quench your thirst. And then, of course, at the very end, we will have a book signing. So the books are already paid for, courtesy of IMC Financial Consulting. And which you'll be able to...
Thank you for that, by the way.
Absolutely. Which you'll be able to also get a photo with Dee as well. Talking about the owners, who is your favorite to work with? And then who was the other? And once you saw them in the room, you were like, oh, here we go again.
My favorite?
If any.
I was trying to be nice, but I was trying to think of someone who's no longer with us. And they're my favorite because they're no longer with us. I don't really have a favorite. I don't like any of them. I don't. I mean, the easiest person or the best person to work with was clearly Robert Kraft. I mean, Kraft he's brilliant. He's smart. For the most part, he thinks about the bigger picture of the league rather than his team. The worst, easily Jerry Jones. I will say this, Jerry has one redeeming quality. It's not that he's a misogynist. It's not that he's probably a racist. Jerry's funny. And Jerry, you have to work with him and you have to deal with him. But, there is a certain quality where I'm always looking for something from someone. Jerry can tell you a good joke.
Yeah.
And, but he is also just the worst bully to deal with at the table. Yeah. Just a tough person. I mean, I would say the elder Rooney, who passed away, was always good to me.
Yeah.
But look, you're talking about a group of people who run a business not to win, but to make money. And the players are there to win, and the owners are there to make money. So there's a divergence of what the purpose is.
Right.
And they know that we will never run out of people who want to play professional football.
Right.
And they've made a decision to run the business in whatever way they want.
Right. What role do you see name, image, and likeness playing? There's a lot of conversation about guaranteed contracts.
Yeah.
And also there is the reality that you have more and more young people making a lot of money. Do you see that influencing some of the compensation structure for the NFL in the future?
I do. Look, the battle over guaranteed contracts is one that I fought for 15 years, and just to kind of level set, just so everybody knows, there's no collective bargaining agreement that guarantees contracts. Everybody thinks baseball has guaranteed contracts because of their CBA. It doesn't. That basketball players have guaranteed contracts because of their collective bargaining agreements. Guaranteed contracts are guaranteed as a matter of custom in professional sports, not the CBA. So, when we reached that point when Kirk Cousins signed the first modern day guaranteed contract, I honestly thought my job was done. I really did. In fact, I took everybody to a party that day. I did. Because look, I knew that Matt Ryan was up the next year, and I knew that Drew Brees was up the following year, and Tom Brady was up that following year, and Peyton Manning was up that following year. And in my head, I thought, well, surely these guys are going to ask for the same structure that Kirk Cousins had. And when they didn't get guaranteed contracts, then the war began. So I think, hopefully, I'm trying to find the most positive thing about NIL, because it is absolutely the right decision, on the college level. It's played its way out in all sorts of crazy ways, but it was absolutely the right decision. I think the one upside is now that a number of players are coming out of college with what is essentially a guaranteed NIL contract.
I'm hoping that more of them take the position of why would I settle for a non-fully guaranteed contract in the pros when I had one for the NIL in college. So I'm hoping that's the mentality. Because you need two things in order for those things to happen. You need players who are willing to go to the mat for a guaranteed contract.
Right.
I mean, and and it's public. I sued the owners because I felt they were colluding to prevent it, and a judge found out that was probably right. But you need the players who are willing to fight for it. So I'm hoping that is the one positive. That now that they have more agency over the way in which their contracts are structured, that they will take that same agency into the pros and make demands that maybe some players before them didn't make.
Right. 14 years in the arena, how would you define leadership in one sentence?
One sentence or one word?
Both.
For me, leadership was dog. I mean, I just think that there are certain leaders that the leaders that I always sought to emulate were the leaders who just had that dog in them. And you're on teams and you realize that there's some people on your team that don't have that dog.
Yeah.
And if I had to say the sentence, it would be dog with a bone. So, but I think that dog mentality is, I'm not here to perpetuate the league's mission. I'm not here to be friends with the owners. I'm not here to try to parlay this into some sort of NFL job. I'm not trying to make the players happy. I'm not trying to make the agents happy. My job is just to be a dog about making the players better.
Right.
And sometimes I thought that, looking back on it, I wish that every now and then I would have taken my foot off the pedal of that a little bit, both for the personal cost, but also maybe for the messaging of it.
Yeah.
But if I had to choose between, running into players 10 years from now, 15 years from now, and having a choice between whether that player comes to me and says, hey man, D man, I really liked you while you were there, or the guy who stands up to say, hey man, I really didn't like you, but I respect what you did, I'll always take the latter.
Right, right. If we could give D. Smith a round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you for being, thank you.
This has been incredible. Again, everyone will be able to get a copy of Turf Wars. We have plenty for those that are here. Make sure you get a signed copy. I've actually been listening to the book through audiobook, and it's actually D on the audiobook, so you can hear his voice, you can hear the texture, you can hear the passion. It's beautiful because I may be on a run and I'm listening to it, and it just the color commentary is great. But as I was sharing with Dee earlier, it was not only inspiring, but it was also not just sobering, but it gave me an element of peace to know that this type of chaotic environment, when dealing with others, professionals, whatever it may be, it's not just me, right? There's others that's going through it and they're able to navigate it 100%. With a level of tactic and strategy. And as my partner C. Green said, get your emotions and leave it in your back seat,
100%.
Right? Where you just got to get your emotions out the way and allow the priority of the day to maintain the main objective. And so, beautiful illustration of being able to learn more about the dynamic of the NFL, the NFL Players Association. But I think more than anything, there's an aspect of leadership that is rooted in the type of leadership that Fred Shuttlesworth would salute to. So in my opinion, and I shared this with Charles during the tour, if there was a Fred Shuttlesworth that represented the players, it's D. Smith. And
Thank
so
you.
grateful for this time.
That's humbling.
Finish the rest of the evening.
That's humbling. Thank you. Love you, man. Thank you very much.
All right. Oh, we got questions. So this is the time for questions.
Oh, yeah.
And I will, here we go. Shut up, Rick.
Good. I don't need a
No, hey, man.
No, he wants the mic to keep you honest.
Yeah,
That's my guy. Man, brother, appreciate you.
Man, thank you for having me.
Coming to Birmingham and sharing this intimate space with us. You spoke about being a father.
Yeah.
And with you having such a high profile position, the question I have is, What would you tell a father whose son says he wants to go play in the NFL, knowing that the NFL was made up of approximately 70% African American, but we got 1.6% who actually play in college, make it to the NFL?
Yeah.
What would you tell that father to tell his son?
If the son was young, high school age, I would say, look, that it is important to have dreams, and if that's your dream, then two things have to happen. One, you have to dedicate everything to that dream, and that's just getting through a series of gates, right? High school, college, graduating high school, graduating college. That's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would tell him is just the facts. That career is 3.3 years. The injury rate is 100%. Nobody leaves the National Football League as a retiree. Everybody leaves the National Football League because you're too hurt to keep playing. It's just reality. So, knowing that for the second thing, I love your dream of going to the NFL. What are we going to do after that 3.3 years? Right? And so to me, you know, I meet a lot of parents, as you can imagine, who are like, hey, I think my son's going to make it. No, he's not. No, he's not. You know, and look, I'm much blunter with the parents than the kids because no, you know, no. And plus, if I can look at you and you're like my height, no, but that, you know, but talking to them about what happens after that 3 years, I think can become really the motivating factor, because now you've turned a kid who's got a great dream about playing in the NFL. If he can be equally diligent or mindful of what it is to do afterwards, it's going to end. Right? And so what I, you know, tell people is, hey man, that dream is fantastic, you know, and everybody goes down that dream, right? Man, I just banned the word retired with our player. Who retires at 26? Right. You need to go get another job. Right. You know, right. So the beauty of what we do, you know, we created the trust. If you play for 1 year and 2 games and you want to go back and get your college degree, the NFLPA pays for it. If you play for 1 game in 2 years and you want to get your law degree, paid for. Medical degree, paid for. You want to learn a trade, paid for. You want to go get another degree, paid for. So all of those things are absolute, you know, gifts to a person who is now using the NFL as what? The stage to the next thing, right? Because you're getting out of school, you know, if you're going to play in the NFL, you're probably going to come from one of the top schools. You know, the greatest blessing is you're going to leave college with no debt. You were on scholarship. So imagine leaving college with no debt. The minimum salary next year is going to be a little bit under $1 million. What I would say to that young man is, man, that's a great dream to have, but now imagine the platform you now have to go on to what's next. That's what I would say. That's great.
Any other?
To the parents, just tell them they're not going to make it.
Really, excellent job, both of you. Great.
Thank you. No, my brother Coop just killed it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Let's give him a round of applause. Yeah. All right, just killed it.
So, I've been able to. This is my favorite interview, but I've seen others that you've had, and I've learned a great deal about the business of the NFL, as well as just more about you. So, as you step off into this next stage, my question for you is like, what's next for you?
Yeah. Well, if you leave it up to my wife, it's nothing. So I've never met somebody who just wants me around the house until I'm actually around the house. And then it's like, well, why are you still here? You know, I teach. So, you know, I'm really passionate about not only sport, but, you know, I started off writing Turf Wars with this idea that the NFL was a microcosm of America. And by the time I got to the end of the book, I felt that America is now being run like the NFL. I mean, our country is literally falling into the hands of a group of oligarchs who control almost every aspect of what we do. I mean, and you think about it, you know, my father, even my generation, a little bit younger,
you always could choose between plenty of companies who controlled your health care or provided you health care, provided you power, provided you energy, provided you access. Now it's a handful of people who control all of it. And so I think what we're seeing now in our democracy, not to get overly political, but safe place to have unsafe conversations, right? I'm really concerned that the America that my kids are going to grow up in is going to be more restrictive, less democratic, more unfair than even the one I went through. And so the only way I know how to deal with that, at least from my own little space, is I teach. So I teach, I was at Yale for 2 years and I was at Pepperdine for 2 years. I'm going to move to USC next year. But I teach a class called Leadership, Law, and Ethics in Sport. And it takes everybody about 6 weeks to realize that it's not a sports class, right? It's a power and race and gender class about how America works. So that's what's next for me.
Thank y'all again for the conversation. Shout out to him with Coop. Do you think that we're missing the unionizer skill set in the current generation? I'm talking like the
100%.
Sorry, because the work that you did with the NFLPA, that's a unionizer skill.
Yes.
The law gave you the tools and the equipment.
It's organizing.
But I think our generation, the millennial generation, Gen Z, Generation Alpha, the skill set, because it takes a certain level of skill set to unionize
100%.
people. And missing it, what can we do?
That's a great question. Again, that's part of the reason I teach. Look, everybody comes out of my class as a Saul Alinsky trade unionist. Man, they come out, literally, everybody comes out like they're almost Che Guevara by the time they get out of school. So I believe in trade unionism, and when you go around this lovely museum, how many times do you see references to trade unionists? Because I do think that there is the same thread, the same unbroken thread that runs through civil rights, to trade unionism, to sports unions, to unionization in America, and everything that the middle class, or mostly everything that the middle class has to lean on now, is a result of trade unionism. So frankly, I think we just all need to get back to that. And not to sugarcoat it, right? The fights that we're going through right now, whether people are going to break through glass ceilings. These are fights that unions have been fighting for 200 years. And at least for the players, in order to demonstrate the importance of unions, I always left them with a story that, remember, the moment that ushered Dr. King into immortality was that he shows up in Memphis for what? Strike. Yep. So literally, that stage that ushers him into immortality was his understanding and belief of how important it was that he be there for the sanitation workers' strike. So I think that this idea that we've somehow separated unions and trade unions and we've decided to have this fight over civil rights, over here, or this fight about women's rights over here, or this fight about Me Too over here, or this fight about wages over here. This idea that we can deconstruct these things and put them in separate, isolated pockets misses the whole. And the whole that runs through it is collectively we can accomplish much more than we can do individually. And literally when I would lose my mind with an owner, and I would say that there are some times where I can get a little bit salty with the language. I'm not going to do it here. But when owners sit up and look at you and they say, well, yeah, I just don't understand, why I'm getting another union speech, I would just say simply, how come you preach so much about team on the field and why you don't want any of these cats to be a team off the field? Just explain that part to me and we'll be good.
I think we need to figure out now of how people in America become more on one team. You know?
Great. All right.
All right, folks, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me here in Birmingham. What a lovely time. Coop, thank you very much. Hey, by the way, big shout out to your team. You guys are absolutely wonderful. And Charles for walking us through this place. It was absolutely lovely. Thank you for coming.
All right.
Appreciate it. We'll continue to talk outside.
Yep.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Book signing will be in a room adjacent to us. I know the news wanted to holler at you real quick.
Oh, yeah, fine.
Yep. And make sure you make your questions brief. You know, don't walk up and say, hey, let me tell you about my story. It'll take 10 minutes. We got to keep it moving, you know. So thank you all for your time. Safe travels on the way back. Stay warm. Make sure you grab you something to eat, something to drink.
Man, that was lovely. Oh, can we take a picture of us up?
Now, you may need to wipe it down. I don't know what it's looking like. Yes, good call. Here. That's a walking legend right there. Oh, that's the walking legend right there. Yeah. All right, so we got dinner.